Hello and welcome. You are listening to the Gay with God podcast, a safe place for us to share our stories and support one another. How long did we know? What challenges did we face? Did we lose our faith? When did we find our way back home? Or are we still searching? The stories you hear on this podcast will melt your heart and strengthen your belief that in God, all things are possible, and you can be authentically gay with the God of your understanding. I am your host, Midge Noble, and I am very honored that you are here. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Gay with God podcast. Thank you for coming and sharing and subscribing. It really makes my heart soar when I see comments, so keep bringing those comments in. I have one very devoted friend who makes a comment on everything, and I thank you, Tracy. I'm going to call you out because I thank you. You're just so uplifting, and I appreciate it. So y'all get on the train and start making those comments because it really does help. It helps not only me, but it helps the folks that come on the podcast to see that you're listening and that you're appreciating what we're sharing. So today I have a very important guest because this person is important to me. She's a friend of mine. She's an author friend of mine. We had a wonderful time at the PYP author event in Connecticut this past month, I guess, last month. One of those months that was not now, but before. And I don't know what time it is where y'all are listening, but it's late afternoon here and I'm just doing great. So I'm excited to have this person with me today because she has an interesting story to tell, and it's important that we hear everybody's points of view, and that's what we're doing today. We're going to hear EllenPatnaude's point of view. So Ellen has always been fascinated by how a person's nature and nurture combined causes them to interact with the people around them. She is a Detroit, Michigan native and graduated from Alma College with a BA in biology and French. She thought she wanted to be Jacques Cousteau. I probably got that right. I'm not sure. I'm not French and I took Spanish. But anyway, her first few science-based jobs pointed clearly towards working with people. She worked for several years as a community organizer in Indiana and Ohio. Returning to Michigan in 2005, her reputation followed her for challenging people to see and be a better version of themselves. And the phone started ringing. Since then, Ellen has built an internationally recognized company supporting individuals and teams in improving everyday important interactions. She recently published a new book, I Thought You Knew, Confessions of a Chronic Assumer and How to Stop Guessing Your Way Through Important Interactions. We'll put the links for that book in the show notes. Her company has recently been certified as an LGBTQ plus owned business. She is a credentialed PCC level executive coach from the International Coach Federation, ICF, and certified in multiple assessment tools. Ellen lives in mid-Michigan with her wife, Danny, at least one, and has as many as 3 teenagers at any given time, 3 cats, and a dog with way too much energy. And I love, and I hope she won't be offended when I say this, but I love that Danny spells her name like my beloved Labrador Retriever that I had for 12 years. And also, that's the name of the character in my first, one of my children's books, Ice Cube Award. The character was named Danny, D-A-N-I. So that's just cool. Cool as we just have so many connections. We just keep finding them. I just love that. So Ellen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm just excited about this conversation because your angst about coming on the show was that you don't have a faith that would be under the umbrella of Gay with God. So what I'd like to do is just start with, have you ever had a faith? How do you define your spirituality or your faith or your religion or whatever? Take me through that. Like, where did you start with? Did you start in a faith or without a faith? Take us through that journey first, and then let's talk about the other part.
Sure. I'm happy to do that. So I come from kind of an interesting start in life. My mother was Jewish. She was born into a fairly prominent Detroit Jewish family that had been established there for a few generations. And my grandfather came over from Germany, escaping Nazi Germany, because one of his parents was Jewish and one was Lutheran. So he had the option of going into a concentration camp or joining the Nazi youth because it was his father that was Jewish. And anybody that knows Jewish tradition knows it passes through the maternal line. So he was not considered fully Jewish because it was his father that was Jewish, not his mother. So that's why he was given the choice. Well, my grandparents married, my mother was born, and as soon as my grandfather got his papers to be a citizen, he was he got his drafting papers and was
Mm,
drafted into World War II. So
mm.
he was sent back to fight against his own countrymen,
Wow.
which, as you might imagine, was hard.
Mm-hmm.
He was injured in a battle over there. He ended up having to work in intelligence work and came home with pretty dramatic, what we would now identify as PTSD.
Mm,
So he came home to my mother, who had just turned 5 and did not recognize him,
mm,
and my grandmother, who'd always practiced Judaism and was part of this family. And he came home so affected by the war that he forbade any form of religion being practiced in their home. So my mother didn't grow up going to temple. She did not have a bat mitzvah. She did not go through any of the rites of passage as a Jewish woman, but it was a part of her identity. And it
mm,
was something that she claimed as part of her ethnic identity. So she married my father, who was a cradle Catholic.
mm-hmm.
And, in 1967, when they got married, my mother was not allowed inside of the Catholic Church as a Jewish woman.
Wow.
And so my parents were married on the steps of the bell tower of the Catholic Church by a priest who had heard of Vatican II. And even though it wasn't being yet practiced in their little church, was willing to marry the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
So right from the beginning, my parents were conflicted themselves about religion, I think. And they had an agreement. They had an agreement that my mother would be allowed to use birth control, which was not allowed in the Catholic Church at
Wow.
the time. And in exchange, any children that they might have, my father was free to raise us in the Catholic tradition. Well, my dad was a cabinet maker and worked for a hospital in the carpenter shop for 30 years and always had a side business building custom cabinets and doing custom kitchens for people. So he did not have time to make sure we were signed up for catechism classes or anything that would have formed my older brother and I in a faith tradition. We just kind of went on Easter and Christmas, and my mother very vocally made sure we knew there were other options. And we didn't really grow up in any tradition. So in the neighborhood, there was this Presbyterian church that hosted a lot of community activities. And we both ended up going through youth group at the Presbyterian church. Alma College was a Presbyterian founded college, the college that I went to. Um, I would say I sort of flirted with Christianity during those years, high school and college, and even a bit after that. Certainly, the work I did as a community organizer, it was doing faith-based community organizing. So even through my early, mid, and late 20s, I was working in an environment where people from all different faith traditions were coming together to address issues in their communities that mattered to them. And I was really fascinated by all the different doctrinal differences and the ways in which these pastors and other faith leaders would come together around a table to address the issues that they had in common, and they'd leave their doctrine at the door. They would simply meet at their point of common value and common self-interest to bring about change in their communities. And I found that to be incredibly powerful. And coupled with the influence of my mother's voice in my head about, the Catholic way is not the only way, I kind of just developed this belief that if there was a God, that God was probably female and was definitely way bigger than would fit inside of any one of the distinctions that were part of any individual denomination or individual faith tradition. I just felt like that story was too big to fit inside of any one of those, especially coming from both a Jewish and a Christian background.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I baptized my children in a Presbyterian church. I attended a Presbyterian church for a while. I certainly identify with the social justice mission of the Presbyterian church. But I don't consider myself Christian. I don't follow that story. I don't believe in that story. I believe in that story as a part of historical record, but I don't believe in that story as the narrative of how life should go. So, I mean, I would say that I don't participate in, nor do I really believe in any kind of structured, organized religion or doctrine,
Mm-hmm.
but I believe in the power of people. And I remember hearing pastors talk about the way in which, if we are made in God's image, as every part of Christianity believes, then we better act like it.
Mm-hmm.
And that you don't hear a lot of sermons about being powerful and acting in the name of social justice. You hear a lot of sermons about being humble and meek. And that was just something I could never reconcile. The hypocrisy inherent in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
denominations was something I just couldn't reconcile. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Mm-hmm.
participate in it. But I'm a firm believer that the law of attraction exists, that karma and energy moves around in the universe. I believe sometimes things are just meant to be or not meant to be. And I definitely believe in the power of people and community. And I think that's, from all of the teaching that I've been exposed to, that's a big part of what any faith tradition believes, at least in its purest form, that we have to be in community with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I put my energy, is being in community with people who share my values and
Mm-hmm.
looking for ways to kind of think about common humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably a super long-winded answer to your question, but there
And
we
I
are.
thank you for that. But see, that's what's so interesting, because I've always believed that doctrine and denominations were never intended by Jesus. Whether Jesus is the Son of God or just a really great holy prophet, the point to me is that the greatest commandment was always love. Everything else, as my priest friend would say, is commentary, basically, or somebody famous said that. But I, I believe that love is the answer. And when we come on common ground in community, in love, and we love one another, that I love what you said about they just left all their differences and their doctrines at the door. And you don't see that anymore today. You don't see anybody leaving
Mm-hmm.
anything at the door. We bring all of our baggage and all of our angst and all of our fears, and we stand on our pedestal and we won't get off. And that's fear based. From my perspective, is that we're all scared to death that if we don't keep in the cause of what we were taught, that we're going to be in trouble. And
$100%.
I think that's why I'm an anomaly, because I don't fit in the strict doctrinal Christian tradition, because they think I'm going to hell. And recently I was kicked out of an LGBTQ group because I brought God into it. And they didn't want that, and they were
Mm-hmm.
offended by that. And I'm like, okay, but I can't be in a group where I can't speak about me. And that's part of me.
Sure.
Not that I'm preaching to anybody. I'm not here to change anybody, because I love how we all have diversity, and that includes our faith. As long as we're based in love, I don't care how we identify, because Jesus wasn't Christian either. So even though I identify as Christian, it's just because that's the way I was raised, and that's something I am almost comfortable with. But I want to have Mother Julie one time, a person that came in and helped us out when our priest was out sick, said, I want to get a t-shirt that on the front says, I am a Christian, and on the backside it says the other kind. because because
Yeah.
Christian has a bad rap right now. Christianity does. And I understand why. I don't like the narrowness and the judgment and the hypocrisy, and I don't like any of that. But I also feel like you can be any faith and walk in love, and be a powerful force in the universe.
A
Yeah.
hundred percent. 100% I agree with that. And when I was a community organizer working with all these different leaders and pastors from all different faith traditions, some Christian, some not. We talked a lot about the mentality of fear and scarcity
Mm-hmm.
versus the mentality of hope and abundance.
Mm-hmm.
And even at a non-faith level, thinking about how we embrace in our lives and the way that we walk through life, how do we try every day to embrace a mentality of hope and abundance that allows us to lean into the possibility, that allows us to take a step out on faith, that and faith with a small f, just the faith and belief
Mm-hmm.
that it's
Mm-hmm.
going to all work out how it's meant to. um, how do we put those things into practice in our daily lives in a way that not only improves our lives but improves the lives of the people around us?
Mm-hmm.
And all of that comes back to teachings of all the different prophets and all the
Mm-hmm.
different religious figures that one might
Mm-hmm.
look up to. So there's something that I find attractive about that idea that my mother used to say, God is way too big to fit inside of either one of these religions in our household.
Mm-hmm.
And we just have to we just have to be okay with that. We have to be
Mm-hmm.
okay with not having all the answers,
Mm-hmm.
and to accepting people who have a different spin on these things or a different understanding of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And the more comfortable and accepting we can be of that, the better off we're going to be. But you're right. Nobody leaves their doctrine or their beliefs or their politics out of anything anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
that's hugely damaging. I think we've seen
Mm-hmm.
evidence of that in
Mm-hmm.
recent history in our country, that it's just hugely damaging when we're not
Mm-hmm.
able to do that.
The brewery that I love in town has partnered with Rhino Leap. It's an organization that does plays and community theater here in town. I go there once a month and tell stories with anybody else who signs up. And last night, a lady stood up and she read a poem that she had written, and it was all about trying to come together, but then she separated people who wanted to label themselves in a negative light. So she would say, like, if I labeled myself lesbian, then I'm being divisive and in a I'm trying to pigeonhole. And she got pretty confrontational in her reading about that on every level. And I thought about that because she said, I don't want to offend anybody. Well, you did. But here's the reason. The reason is because, and my wife and I talked about it on the way home, and I said, I said I was really vibing with her poem at first because it really seemed like it was social justice oriented. And then it condemned people for being who they are, trying to advocate for what they need. And unfortunately, in our society, if we don't call ourselves out as a minority, we're not going to have a voice. So it's almost like we've been set up to pigeonhole ourselves and to identify as something and put ourselves in the box, which we wanted to come out of anyway. But if we don't stand on that box, then nobody's going to know we're here. We're going to be invisible. So that balance of how can I be visible? How can I stand in love and get my voice heard and get justice, get equity, get what I need and what I expect, So it's a challenging time for all of us because you and I, you know, in the skin that we're in the loves that we have in our lives, we can have that all taken away.
100%. 100%. And it's a scary time to have
Mm.
children who fly under the rainbow flag as well. And
Yes.
watching them navigate this world and think
Mm.
about what kind of a future they are going to have to reconcile with and navigate,
Mm.
um, is absolutely, truly terrifying at some points.
Yeah, it is because we have fought. I haven't fought as long as everybody else has because, I came out so late. But when you think about, since Stonewall, the fights, the deaths, the fear, the imprisonment, all the things that people have gone through with Pray the Gay Away and conversion therapy, and we think about that back then and how long they fought and how far we've come to be married to our spouses, to have some sort of rights. But then when you look at the new Speaker of the House, who hung us out there. I mean, pretty boldly. I mean, let's not try to guess what you think. I appreciate you being honest, but then we look at these kids, your kids, everybody's kids who are just beginning to come through and have a generation that is so much more open and so much more aware than you and I ever were. And yet they may have to go backwards and start over. What? That's
Right.
lunacy.
Yeah, it really is. And it's terrifying. And yeah, I mean, the new Speaker of the House is quite openly coming for gay marriage. And
Oh,
so,
absolutely.
we like, what does that mean for what we have to do with our spouses, with our legal spouses? What does
Yeah.
that mean for what we're going to have to put in place to make sure those our wishes are respected, to make sure that we can visit each other in the hospital? And we had a situation when my youngest was 6 and in the hospital in an emergency situation where even though we thought we were signing all the right forms, it didn't matter. And I got on an airplane, and the decision had to be made to take the child into emergency surgery, and they wouldn't do it till they could get me on the phone, even though I had signed the damn form that they asked me to sign. So it just opens up all kinds of other fear that of what can happen, and extra steps that we have to take to simply have the same respect given to our relationships that straight people have. And yeah, it really is kind of a depressing moment to think about. Not what I mean, I have 2 children who identify under the rainbow flag in one form or another, and to think about them navigating the world moving forward is one set of fears. But just thinking about what my wife and I have and what we want to be able to protect in terms of our assets and our states and our wishes, it's a difficult moment right now.
And then we go back to, hope and abundance. And I don't think anything can count out the power of hope and the power that people collectively can bring. So when you talk about community and you talk about coming together and all hoping for the same thing, it's going to take a little bit more than hope and prayers. It's going to take a whole lot of, but hope is important, because if we don't have an inkling of hope, we won't mobilize anything. But I was talking to a group the other day, and they said, it's going to take more than just talking about it. We're going to have to show up. We're going to have to show up at marches. We're going to have to show up with our legislatures and our write-ins and getting editorials in newspapers. And we're going to have to put ourselves out there, because the volume of voices that it's going to take to let this country know that this country would not be this country without all of us contributing. 100%. When you think about it, if we all left, or if we all refused to do what we were doing now and did something else, I mean, there's a huge impact on the creativity of this nation, on the beauty of this nation, on the social justice of this nation. We are everywhere, and they just don't realize how big we really are, because many of us are silent. And I respect that. And I also hope that whoever still has to be silent to protect their life will be doing something at the polls, because the votes are what's going to make a difference in what happens next. We have to vote out the people who are not allowing all of the United States of America people have their equal and equitable rights. We have to vote.
100%. 100%. Midge for president.
That's the funniest thing anybody's ever said. Funnier than when they told me I should write a memoir. This is way funnier than that. Well, yeah, I appreciate that. And yet I would be the worst president ever, because I lead with my heart and not with my head. And I don't understand any of the paperwork. I don't understand any forms ever. I give it to my wife, and then I say, tell me what it says. Explain it to me, Lucy. Because I don't understand any of that. My brain works in a whole different way. So we're talking about you having children and a spouse, and her name is Danny. So let's we're gonna leave this social justice discussion in the place of hope and prayerful enforcement.
There you
Because
go.
whoever you pray to, be it a tree, a god, a moon, or a star, put it out there, and let's put the law of attraction out there. And we're going to, because I believe in the law of attraction too, and you put it out there and you just keep visualizing it, feeling it as if it's already happened, and get that powerful visualization going. And let's bring us some justice, and let's bring us some leaders that can actually do something, and have a Congress that can work together with someone, whoever she may be. Because
Absolutely.
the men really haven't been doing what we need them to do lately. So I need us to have a woman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just want it to be somebody that is sane and loving and smart enough to get the job done here and across the seas, however that needs to happen. So let's go back in time when you were a little girl being raised by these people.
Mm-hmm.
When did you know that you might not be straight?
Well, it's so what I can identify are moments of attraction to other girls, but I did not recognize that as meaning that I might be gay necessarily. I grew up in Detroit. I grew up in the city of Detroit, and there were in I was born in 1973, so 70s and 80s. I graduated from high school in 1991, just to give you a sense of the time frame.
Mhm.
And during that time, there was a very active and visible male gay community in Detroit, and my parents were attached to it. My We had several neighbors on our block that were either single gay men or gay men couples. I used to regularly house sit for a gay couple down like 3 doors down from our house. Also, the man who owned the flower shop where my parents met as teenagers
Aw.
was a gay man, and he was a part of our lives. He was always Uncle Stan. And so I was around it all the time, but it was never something we just discussed. It just was, that's just Bill and Steve. They're coming for dinner tonight. And Uncle Stan is teaching a flower arranging class at the local community church. I mean, it just was such a part of life, but we didn't talk about it. There was no conversation. It wasn't a secret. It was just normal. It was just normal part of life. But I don't remember ever seeing or meeting or knowing of any lesbians during that time. I just knew that in second grade, I wanted to kiss Michelle Puckett's dimples more than I wanted to eat my sandwich. I just thought she was the cutest little thing. And, there were other incidents like that throughout my school age years where I just was wildly attracted to another girl in a very physical way. But I thought I thought everyone was attracted to girls or women. I thought everyone was. I mean, really, what is not to love? We smell
That's right.
better. We're soft. I mean, like, there's just so many boobs. I mean, there's just so many things to love, right?
Yep.
Sorry, should I not say that?
Yes, I think that's
But
perfectly fine.
so I knew that I was attracted to girls. I just didn't recognize it as, oh, that might mean that I'm gay. Although I did come across an old diary. And when I don't remember now if I was 9 or if I was 12. I think I might have been, I don't remember if it was 9 or 12.
Hmm.
I wrote in there, am I gay? Which I thought
Ah,
was so interesting. I have no memory of writing about it, but I then proceeded to rationalize in my diary entry, no, you're just attracted to Stephanie, and it's okay, and it's normal, and she's pretty, and everyone thinks Stephanie is pretty, including all the boys. So it's just a normal thing for you to think that other girls are pretty. That's just normal. You're not gay. Isn't that interesting?
that is
I couldn't
very
believe it when I came
interesting.
across that.
That is funny.
Yeah, no idea what it meant, but I just thought it was so interesting. So when I got to college, I that's when I became aware that maybe this might mean something about my
Hmm.
sexual orientation,
Hmm.
but I was terrified of disappointing my parents.
Mm,
There was a very clear expectation that I was going to grow up and marry a nice boy and have babies and be a mom. There's just a
mhm.
super clear expectation of that. And I thought boys were easy. They were just uncomplicated.
Yeah.
And so it was easy to attract them. It was easy to flirt with them. It was, I flirted with girls and boys probably equally during that time, but just secretly was dying for physical interaction with a
Mm,
female.
mm,
I pushed that shit way down as far as I
mhm.
could because I was terrified of the disappointment. I I did in fact marry not one, but two boys. One just didn't work out very clearly, very quickly. But the second one is the father of my two children, and I'm grateful for that. We have
Mhm.
two very well planned children. Thank God for ovulation kits, because neither of us was particularly interested in the other one in a physical way, honestly, for most
Mm.
of the relationship that we had. But we got along really well. It was easy. And so we made it work. And I'm grateful that I have my two boys. I love my two children dearly. Um, but we were pretty miserable after the first one was born. We were pretty miserable, but we pushed through and had that second one because we thought that fixed everything.
Uh-huh.
And I had a group of friends who started, they were all young moms. We were in this moms club together and they started playing soccer. They joined this women over 30 league in our community and invited me to come. And I was so miserable and eager to get away at any opportunity I could from home that I said absolutely yes. And I signed up with them and started playing soccer with them. And within the first few weeks of playing those games, I saw Danny. She was on a different team, she was playing on a different field, but I saw her. And it was this, I am not kidding or exaggerating when I say it was this threshold moment. Those moments that once you have them, you cannot go back.
Mm-hmm.
I had a threshold religious experience on that field, nearly wet myself and thought, holy shit, I cannot run away from this anymore. That I am so attracted to that person over there that I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. And I sat on it for like 3 weeks and made myself miserable. I made myself ill. I dropped a bunch of weight. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I didn't even know her name. I
Wow.
just knew that I was insanely attracted to this woman. And the path I had walked up to that moment made me realize, okay, it's time to quit running away from this. You're going to make yourself miserable. So at the age of 35, with a 2 year old and a 4 year old, I decided I needed to leave my marriage and come what may. Let's see what happens. So I asked my then husband for a separation, to which he immediately agreed and said, "Oh, thank God! I've just been waiting for you to want to be a single mom. Peace out. I'm going back to Chicago." and and then I was on my own, and then I was free to approach this creature over whom I had been obsessing. I'd found out what her name was, and I approached
Stalker.
her. I did. We absolutely stalked her. Yes, yes, that's exactly what happened. And we had our first conversation, and it just kind of spiraled from there. And tomorrow, we will celebrate 15 years of being
Ooh,
together.
ooh, congratulations. I'm as you're
Thank you.
talking, I'm imagining you being on this field. This is like a movie waiting to happen. So you're standing on this field and all time stops and things are
Yep.
swirling around you and you're locked in and you have a magnifying glass and you're drawing her to you from across the field. I can see it. Okay, so we'll work on that movie. Who do we know? Kim Clark has done movies. She's been on my show before, wrote the forward to my book. We might need to get Kim involved. Love story of the ages.
Okay. The deal. The deal. I know Kim as well.
Oh, cool. So anyway, so you find out her name, you have a conversation, and had she I mean, how did that move forward from there? I mean, you grew up in a family that embraced the gay people in the community, but they weren't their children. So how did that work?
Yes.
Oh, did you see that behind me?
Wow.
What is
I
that?
sure did. I don't know, but
Wow.
it was pretty magical.
It is. Okay, so folks, we just had this. I'm glad it wasn't just me hallucinating. Behind me, all of a
No,
sudden, whatever I said, I got like all of this. What was that? Fireworks behind
fireworks.
me?
It was
Well, that
fireworks.
is so appropriate for what we're talking about. So the fireworks between you and Danny
Yeah.
are
Yep.
palpable in this podcast. So
Yeah.
how did that work with your family? Um, leaving the husband, having two kids on your own. I can just hear a
Yeah.
mother, especially from the
Oh,
Jewish tradition of
the,
we don't do these things.
we do not. We
Mm.
do not do these things. Yeah, it's so interesting. About 6 weeks after my separation, I worked up the courage to have a conversation with my parents because I knew that I was going to need to. And they could tell, they knew that I was, obviously, they knew I was going through the separation. What they couldn't figure out is why I was not more upset and
Ah,
why I was not more miserable.
mm-hmm.
And the reality was that as soon as we separated, I had a conversation with Danny. And I mean, nothing happened for, the first little while, but we'd had a conversation, and that to me cemented things. And I was absolutely obsessed. I was lusting after her. And, and so they couldn't figure out why I wasn't more upset, and they were being suspicious. So I knew I was going to have to say something.
Mm-hmm.
So I sat them down and I said, okay, listen, I need to talk to you. I need to share. Um, and my dad said, there's somebody else, isn't there?
Mm.
And I said, yes, there is, but it's not who you'd expect. And I said, I have pretty strong feelings developing for another woman. And my dad said, my cradle Catholic 65-year-old father said, well, it's about damn time.
Oh, really?
And I said, what? And he said, girl, I have known since you were a little kid that you were gay.
Wow.
And I said, I don't, I was speechless for a moment, but
I'm
that never
sure.
lasts long with me. So I said, I don't, how could you, what do you mean? How did you know? And he said, the same way that you know about your now 5-year-old son,
Ah,
which is true, because
uh-huh.
I absolutely knew that he was gay. In fact, his father and I had conversations about it.
Uh-huh.
Well, nobody talked to Sam for more than 5 minutes without going, oh, yeah, that one's gay. Like he just was, we just knew. Everybody just knew. Your gaydar is going off even if you don't have gaydar.
Right, right.
So my father was like, yeah, I just knew because you're my child. That's how I knew. And I said, why didn't you ever say anything to me? And he laughed. He was like, seriously, have you met yourself? Nobody could tell you anything. He said, you had to walk this road and figure this out for yourself.
Yeah.
No one was going to be able to tell you this.
Mm-hmm.
And through this, my mother is sitting there uncomfortable and silent,
Mm-hmm.
and definitely the more progressive of my two parents. So my dad's reaction caused this false hope and belief for me that she was going to take it
Mm-hmm.
equally as well,
Uh-huh.
but she did not.
Mm.
Because my mother was, may she rest in peace, was a little bit of a narcissist and very, very consumed by what other people thought
Mm.
and other people's opinions and appearances. And all she could think is, but you're straight. You've been married for 7 years. You've had these two children. So she had a hard time wrapping her head around this. She had a
Mm-hmm.
very traditional view of life and
Mm-hmm.
relationships. You're either one or the other. It's black or it's white. And certainly there's no changing lanes in the middle of the road. And so she struggled with it for a while, but didn't say anything. And I remember a couple weeks after that conversation having a phone call with her. And I don't remember why, but for some reason I referenced being a lesbian.
Mm.
And she suddenly screamed at me and said, do you have to carry a placard that says, I used to be straight, but now I'm gay? And I was like, well, first of all, if such a placard exists, please order me one. But second of all, I think you're being a little ridiculous, Mom. This is who I've always been. Talk to Dad. He knew. How did you
Mm,
not have conversations about this among each other?
mhm,
Like we talk about our children all the time. How could you
mhm.
not be talking about your children? Well, it was a different era. I don't think they talked
Yeah,
about us
they
in
probably
that
didn't.
way.
Not about that. Yeah. And I'm sure he
Certainly
never
not.
breathed a
So
word, to her about that because he knew your mother too.
definitely not. Of
And he didn't
course,
want to get
very much
it.
so.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it just was never a conversation that developed. But I mean, she did come around, but unfortunately, well, she came around, and that's what mattered. She came
Mhm.
around because there were a few of her friends, her contemporaries, and all of a sudden they had adult children coming out.
Uh-huh.
And one of whom was a neighbor down the road whose daughter also had been married and had a couple of children
Hmm.
and was coming out. And so then
Uh-huh.
suddenly it was like the cool kids club,
Yeah.
right?
We're the social
And so
justice
then it was
parents.
fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, right.
Well,
Then it was
and
fine. And
there's
plus,
community. She needed community
yeah,
to feel safe. Yeah.
she totally did. She did need community. But also, Danny gets a lot of the credit too. So Danny is short for Danielle. That's why she spells it that way,
Hmm.
Dani. But she is my polar opposite. Sweet and nice are not usually two words that come to mind when people think about me, but they do when they think about Danny. She
Mm.
is very empathetic. She's very compassionate. She reads people really well, and she's very good at making them feel comfortable when they're uncomfortable. So she just very naturally set about winning my parents over, which was not hard for her to do. So my mother absolutely adored her until the very end of her life,
Mm.
and my father as well. My father still adores her. Pretty sure both of my parents loved me more than they loved Danny, but I'm pretty sure they like her more than they like me because she's just more likable. She's just easier to like. But
Mm.
yeah, so she also had a lot to do with my mom coming around, I think.
That's sweet. I'm glad that she was able to be a buffer at times when you might have needed it. So, how do you think people refer to
Mm.
you, if not sweet and nice?
Oh, I think they recognize my willingness to be brutally honest,
Mm-hmm.
to not be afraid to say what other people might be thinking, but don't know how to
Mm-hmm.
find the words for. That's my
Mm-hmm.
gift. My
Mm.
I it took me a long time to embrace it, but I embrace it. I am absolutely the person who will call it like I see it. And I try very hard to do that with compassion and with
Mm-hmm.
empathy, but there is very little that needs to be said that I won't say. Like very
Mm-hmm.
little,
Mm-hmm.
because that's just who I am. That's just
Mm-hmm.
who I am in my nature.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that we need everybody, you know. There are people who never speak up, but they can fit in and get along, but nothing changes when you fit in and get along. We need them to
Right.
buffer, but we need us because I don't hold my tongue much either, much to the dismay of my wife and sometimes my church
Hmm.
congregation, I'm sure. But yeah, I have to speak if because it almost feels like my head will explode if I don't. If I have something to offer,
Uh-huh.
I need to have it said and I have to say it. Yeah. And I do
A
try to lead
hundred
with love,
percent.
but but sometimes you can't recognize it, I'm sure. Yeah.
100%. That's me to a T as well. And Danny and your wife would probably find kindred spirits in each other as well.
Yeah, I'm sure we have we have other friends who we look at each other and say, "Oh, okay, so you're me in the relationship and you're her, right?" It's like opposites attract. It's like, yeah, if you put my friend Shar and I together alone for very long, one of us will be in trouble. So
Yeah.
we need the spouses to kind of say, run shotgun and say, "Okay, girls, come here, come here. Shh, don't say that
Hmm.
out loud. This is not the place to say it." Oh,
Yeah.
well, you have lived through a life of eggshells, it feels like sometimes that there were things that may not have been able to be said, things couldn't be talked about openly, even though you had a lot of diversity around you. It was never talked about as far as exploring your own sexuality, being able to be open enough to have a conversation with you early on about what's going on. How did that play into who you are now, do you think, being raised in a place where you might not have been able to be exactly who you needed to be early on?
Uh, it's really, it has reared its head and continues to rear its head as, fighting against the question of self-worth and,
Mm-hmm.
feeling like you're enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just finishing the first draft of my next book, which is about the journey that we went on with my mother, who suffered
Mm-hmm.
from Lewy body dementia
Mm-hmm.
and died after a very short battle with it. It was barely 4 years from the first signs to her death.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived on quite the roller coaster during that time. And one of the themes, as I read over what I've written in this book, the themes that come up over and over again are just themes around feeling like I'm never enough, feeling like I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't worth it or wasn't enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to a friend who whose own mother was fighting a losing battle with glioblastoma during a portion of the time that my mother was ill. And we've known each other for many, many years. And so we talked on the phone often because he and his partner moved across the country to caregive for his mom. My wife and I were caregiving for my mom, in addition to my dad. And we used to talk all the time. And he would get on me regularly about not doing enough for my own self-care.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him recently, after reading through what I'd written in this book, what's clear to me is that I remember scoffing when he would say, "What are you doing to take care of yourself? When was the last time you and Danny went out together?" And I would laugh and I would chalk it up to never having enough time. But the reality, as I'm writing these tips in every chapter of like things I wish I had done or things I wish I
Mm-hmm.
had known at this stage,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm recognizing painfully clearly is that I didn't think I was working hard enough. I didn't think I deserved self care because my mother was constantly telling me or showing me in one way or another that I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't doing it right. I wasn't doing it enough. I was always trying to catch up. And it's a mentality that's pervasive. If I really want to be painfully honest and look around my life, I can see signs of it in my personal life. I can see signs of that in my business. I can
Mm-hmm.
see signs of it in the books that I've written. This
Mm-hmm.
this notion that we have to somehow earn or
Mm-hmm.
be worthy of
Mm-hmm.
taking care of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think walking on eggshells and navigating these things as I had to do in my early life in particular is where a lot of my anger and frustration about that idea came from. And yet
Mm-hmm.
it's still sunk in and grabbed hold of me. I was a
Mm-hmm.
very, very angry young woman through my
Mm-hmm.
teenage years and in my early 20s. Community organizing gave me such a great outlet to express that anger as social justice. But the reality is that the sources of it absolutely came from feeling constantly like I just was never going to be enough.
Right.
And my mother reinforced that message all the way through all the way through to the end of her life.
Mm-hmm.
The last coherent conversation I had with her, she made a snide remark
Mm-hmm.
about me to my brother. So like yeah, it's been a lifelong battle
Mm-hmm.
and it
Mm-hmm.
shows up everywhere, much to my dismay.
Yeah. Which combines with what we were talking about before, as far as not being enough in this country, that we're still trying to
Mm.
feel like that we deserve our own place with the heterosexuals. It's like we're just not able to have our place. And many of us come from either religious trauma or family trauma, and that stymies us when we're trying to politically stand up for ourselves, because there is that nagging voice. Well, I shouldn't make a fuss, or I shouldn't, I'm not worthy enough yet to be a part of the great United States of America and have equality. Bull crap. But yet we know that in our head, but what's running behind are all those messages that we grew up with. So messaging, unworthiness and lack of respect for other people really does pivot them for a lifetime of swirling in that, unworthiness and not feeling like they are enough. So we do have to be so, so careful. One with raising children, but also just in anything. If you're a coach, if you're a teacher, if you're a youth minister, whoever you are, the words that we speak to each other can last an entire lifetime and beyond. So we have to be so careful. And what we say to ourselves, speaking about the law of attraction, if we're sending out messages to the universe that I'm not enough and I don't deserve it, the universe will completely appreciate that, because it doesn't weigh it. Is it good or bad? It just brings us what we dwell on the most. So cleaning up our own karma around us and how we speak about ourselves, what we say about ourselves, and how we set ourselves up for self-love. Whether we feel like we deserve it or not, we have to be able to attract back to us what we want to project out into the world.
100%. Said it better myself.
Oh my gosh. We could just be here for hours, but your kids are going to want the Wi-Fi back. And you said only an hour for them. And I'm afraid that you will have some kind of mutiny on your hands. So before we close, let's talk a little bit. Give me a little bit of information for all of the folks listening today about your first book, the one that they actually can buy right now. And your other book, you will come back to the Gay with God show and we will promote that one when you get it out there. But let's talk a little bit about your other book, I Thought You Knew, Confessions of a Chronic Assumer. Tell folks what it's about and why it's so great. I know why, but you go ahead and tell.
So I Thought You Knew is a collection of, I started noticing in 2020 when the world shut down and all of a sudden these teams of leaders and managers that I had worked with in person in groups were now dispersed into their own private spaces. Assumptions really went why people were or were not responding to emails and how quickly and whether they were turning their cameras on or not. And things were there were so many assumptions being made that I found myself saying over and over again, do you know that that's true? Do you assume? So I decided I had enough information, enough collection of stories about it. And there seemed to be some interest in this as a topic to my own circle of people. So I decided I was going to write a book about 10 different ways that assumptions show up and really interfere with or downright harm. And once I started writing, I realized I have a lifetime of getting this completely wrong. So every chapter is like 3 stories of usually me getting this wrong. Here's another way you could think about doing this. And then maybe some tips or ideas of a different way you could do it. So it's an easy read. It's relatively entertaining. I like to think that I'm funny. So
you are.
Humor. And yeah, it's meant to help you think differently about your interactions and pay attention to where assumptions show up, because they really are so pervasive. We don't even notice them half the time.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for being here today. It has been delightful because I love you and I just love spending time with you. But thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me, Midge. This has been such a great conversation and I can't wait to do it again. So thank you.
Yes, I can't wait either. So guys, to get all the links that you can reach out and connect with Ellen for, they will be on the show page. So will be the link to I Thought You Knew book. And remember that as we're leaving today and leaving Ellen for a little bit of time, if you are ready to start your own faith journey, you can join the Gay with God Facebook group, My Faith Journey. And if you go to the Gay with God Facebook group, you're automatically able to get into the My Faith Journey. We're actually having one in a couple of weeks, so you have plenty of time to get hooked up with that. And I will be starting, instead of the Ask Me Anything groups that I was doing online to promote my memoir, I'm now doing the Gay with God Book Club group. So if you've gotten the book and you've read the book, come and join us first at the Gay with God Facebook group, and you'll be able to have the links for the new Gay with God Book Club. So those are things I'm excited about. And as I set up more events, they will also be on my website, gaywithgod.com. I also want to remind you that if you are LGBTQ plus and you were raised in a conservative evangelical church, you may need to have the assistance of Keith Brown, who is a bisexual man, and after working on his own healing, as well as that of his clients for over 30 years, he has decided to take all his personal and professional experiences and put it into a digital course to help you. It's called Wipeout Trauma, and you can find the link to that 10-day journey to create a systematic and practical plan on the website at empoweredmidge.podbean.com. Keith also includes a forum community where you can ask questions, get support, and make connections with other students. It's an incredible course, and it's practical, and it's available now at a low price that you just won't believe. So find that link on the show page at empoweredmidge.podbean.com. And if you're seeking coaching for your coming out or faith journey and you would like to connect with me, you can also go to the gaywithgod.com website and find links on how to get in touch with me. So if you are listening to this podcast and you are questioning whether you can be gay and be in a relationship with the God of your understanding, if you identify as LGBTQIA+, or not even sure if you're gay, God has always been within you. Even if you didn't know it, you have always been gay with the God of your understanding. Thank you, everybody. Stay tuned and see how you can join the Gay with God community. And as always, you are loved. I want to invite you to become a part of the Gay with God community. How can you do that? Stay connected by messaging me your thoughts and comments in the comment section under the downloads of the show on the Gay with God show page. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen and share so we can increase our community outreach and be a light to those who are struggling to claim their faith. Consider being a sponsor so I can highlight your service in our community. We are all worthy of respect and a relationship with the God of our understanding. I want to thank you in advance for supporting this podcast. Together, we as a community will keep this show visible and our community stronger. Deep gratitude to my friend Tim McClendon of Tim McClendon Music for allowing me to use an excerpt from Interlude 4, a song found on his CD entitled Sundance.